Hello, my friends. Just wanted to come on for a little bit and talk a little bit about grounding. This is a common term these days. We have grounding sheets, grounding practices. And I just wanted to, share a little bit about it because it seems like there is, a little misunderstanding between like grounding and earthing. So grounding is when we allow energy to flow freely. Grounding is the practice of energy moving through a body, through a vessel, through a space. Grounding is the transmission of energy fluidly through something. And I'm trying to keep that broad because the ways in which we ground are, numerous. So a good example to think of is if you're in construction or if you own a home or have a home, if you've ever lived in a home, there are grounding wires. These grounding wires are meant to, when the house gets struck by lightning or when there's like an electrical surge, they take that energy and transmute it down into the ground to disperse so your refrigerator doesn't blow out or a fire doesn't start. It's to allow that energy to channel and travel the way it needs to. So our body has very similar structures. We have systems within us that allow energy to flow through us. Behind me here are some anatomy trains, phenomenal understanding by Tom Myers. Myofascial chains are the ways in which our body links together to distribute force. So they're everywhere. This is where biomechanics come in. This is where kinesiology comes in. The ways in which our body moves in the world is how we distribute force, energy. This premise of grounding, the feeling we get when we feel grounded is the feeling when energy's flowing as it needs to. That with the understanding that everything is energy, whether it's sped up to the speed of light or slowed down to the speed of a table. Everything is energy. Nothing is not energy. Your thoughts are energy. Light is energy. Our bodies are energy. Our emotions are energy. So the ability to allow energy to flow freely is how we keep ourselves in a grounded state. So as I started talking about the earthing concept, earthing is a way to ground. That when you have your feet in the soil, in the earth, walking on uneven surfaces, just you are creating a grounding flow of energy down into the earth. There's energy transference. You can get into the science of it. I'll save that for the people that wrote books about the stuff. But there is, ionic transference on an electrical level, in which the energy on the earth and the energy in our body start to share and mingle. This is the flow, and that flow is the grounding. Again, it's kind of a semantics thing, but it makes a big difference because grounding practices are pretty much any of the things we do to calm ourselves or to even to stimulate ourselves. That grounding practices can be more akin to energy flow practices. So any ways in which you have a blockage in your mind, in your body, in your world, in your life, you are creating an energetic buildup. And the practice in which you need to offset that to allow that energy to flow depends on what the blockage is. So if we have an emotional blockage, around our heart being hurt, then we would want to facilitate practices that invite the opening of that blockage. There's other folks that have a similar heart blockage, but it's from an overly expansive state. So the grounding practice there would be more around insulating, around boundary creating. You can think of the insulating wires, the insulation around wires. That would be a containment practice to allow the energy to flow freely. Because otherwise, if you get frayed aspects of the insulation, or if there's no insulation at all, then that current can't flow smoothly. Now, same thing in our nervous system. We have these myelin sheaths around our nerves, and their purpose is to allow energy to flow freely along the chain, from one end of the nerve to the other. There are some creatures that don't have these, and the current is slowed down. But the way our nerves are set up, are built, are structured, there's fast transference of energy. Again, so it's an insulation to allow flow. So these energetic blockages, these ways in which energy gets stuck or built up or can't flow freely, are the things that keep us stuck. If you have an excessive mental energy, you will tend to have anxiousness. You tend to overthink. So your grounding practices would be to shift that energy down. It can be simple things like unlocking your knees, inviting your center of gravity to shift down. It might be doing some myofascial stretching in the legs to invite energy down. It might be strengthening exercises to firm your solidity of your connection to the earth. Those would be the practices that would allow energy to flow where it needs to, down. Sometimes folks are too down. So their grounding practices would be around lightening, oftentimes changing diet, inviting lighter foods, focusing on particular meditations, spiritual practices, somatic movements, things that invite the body to soften, to allow for energy to flow up. A lot of times, sound. There's one of my poster I have outside. It says grounding practices: 5 things you can see, 4 things you can smell, 3 things you can hear. It's very common, but that very practice is about shifting that energy flow from spinning in between this tiny little space here to start to distribute down, going back into the sensory world. There's too much energetic buildup in between the ears and not enough in the body, in the world around us. So we use this present moment practice to shift that energy down. Well, then that energy is able to flow again because now it's not built up in a particular spot. I'm a big fan of myofascial balls, again, for working with fascia, that we have this hyaluronic acid in our tissues, which is a water-based fluid, but it's more akin to like a gel matrix, maybe would be a better terminology for it. Not even so much that. But anyways, when, say, these tissues get dehydrated, what do we know about water? If it's lightning out, do we get in the water? No, why? Because water's a great conductor of electricity, of energy. Our fascia is a great conductor of energy. It not only distributes but it can become a barrier when the hydration gets low, when your tissues get adhesions, dehydration, and stuckness. Almost think of maybe saran wrap that's been scrunched together. It's all stuck together. This is kind of like a raisin. You got a raisin, you got a grape. Grape is a hydrated fascia. Raisin, dehydrated fascia. So the point is to invite hydration into the body, and how we go about that might be scraping. It might be active release work. It might be gentle, soft pressure over a period of time. There's a variety of ways. It might be a prolonged stretch. These all do the same thing to rehydrate tissues to allow for energy to flow. This is the grounding practice. One of my favorite tools that I use with people is a Tibetan bowl. Playing this on someone's body is a wonderful way to ground and allow energy to start to flow into areas that it was otherwise restricted. You might start off on the chest playing the bowl, and the vibrations that ripple out, spreading through the tissues, much like the ripples of a pond, spread throughout the entire body. And these ripples spread through the tissues, and they invite awareness to come to areas that may have been being ignored. Well, what's awareness? It's energy. So as we increase our awareness on the different regions of our body, we increase our energy flow to those areas of the body. So this understanding that grounding is the practice of energy flowing. And anywhere in which energy is not flowing, we find stagnation. We find disease. The ability to allow stuff to flow in and flow out. And I'm just speaking of the physical world. We can take this into the other energetic realms. The same principle applies, that if energy is not flowing fluidly, then there is a breakdown in the system somewhere. Because that's what our entire existence is made up of. That's what our entire consciousness, God existence, human experience, it all falls under energy moving, flowing. This is why one of my favorite concepts is anicca, the Pali understanding of impermanence. And why that's so powerful is because flow is really the only constant in existence. That, as they say, energy is neither created nor destroyed in a vacuum environment. And as things flow and transition from one space, from one experience to another, this is the nature of life, the nature of reality, flow. So this practice of grounding it has such huge implications, which is why I find it's important to clarify and understand. I might elaborate a little bit more in the future. I don't know. It's just on my mind recently because I hear a lot of this misunderstanding between earthing and grounding, and they are very distinct differences. To me, they matter. A practice of co-regulation, being around somebody that, well, our nervous systems co-regulate whether we really want them to or not. But pay attention when you're around a bunch of anxious people, a bunch of angry people. What happens to you? You tend to get anxious and angry. When you're around calm people, for the most part, you tend to get calm. Sometimes the opposite happens. You realize that you're not calm, which makes you anxious. That's a story for another time. But the fact of the matter is that co-regulation is a practice of energy transference. That when I am in proximity of somebody else, my energy is being intermingled with theirs. And this flow, this exchange of energy is a grounding practice. This is why you're around some people and you just breathe easier. This is why you just go, because there's not a mental barrier blocking energy flow. There's an openness. And then this excessive accumulation that would almost end up in a short circuit is allowed to flow and disperse. Well, then I feel lighter. Energy's flowing. That feeling of energy flowing is the feeling of grounding, is the feeling of presence, is the feeling of love. There's some circles that I'm a part of that understand that love is nothing more than energy transference between one individual and another. You know, the transference of energy amongst everything is love. Well, I've just laid out the past 15 minutes how this flow of energy links and connects everything. So everything is love. Grounding is love. The transference of energy in all its many forms is honestly the very nature of existence. In any ways in which we resist or fight, or in which there is barriers or blockages, is how we go from love to fear, from contraction to from expansion to contraction, from flow to stagnation, from health to disease. We'll bring it back to the body to wrap things up. So in alignment-based yoga, we focus very much on allowing for the right positions of your body. You know, so for example, like down dog, you know, you would keep your upper arms kind of rotated, you know, externally rotated enough to keep space, kind of so your neck's not jacked up, but allow the scapula to kind of roll away from the spine in which it needs to. When we do that, we keep a good engagement between the muscles of the shoulder blade and the arms, you know. And so as you're in down dog and you're pressing down into your fingers, you're feeling your roots of your fingers down into the earth, drawing that energy up. That energy is flowing up through your arms. Well, if you have disengagement, well, then you end up, you know, with stagnation, energy stuck here. It's not able to flow through the rest of the body, so we end up with issues. We end up with nerve blockages. We end up with disc issues. We end up with pain and all sorts of because there's a blockage here. You know, so as we invite the right alignment, the right movement capacity, well, then that energy that goes from the energy of your body pressing down into the earth creates energy. It creates, what is it, piezoelectric energy, I think? Don't quote me on that. But that very weight generates energy. And if, say, your wrists are disengaged or your fingers are disengaged, then all that energy is just staying right there, crushing and hurting. But when you keep engagement through the entire arm chain, well, then that energy flows from the fingers through the arms, up into the shoulders, down into the rest of the body. You feel this openness of this energy flow, and you feel powerful when you're in it. If you haven't experienced that, that's the practice, because when you do feel that posture the way it's meant to be engaged, it invigorates, it grounds, because energy is not being stuck anywhere. It's able to flow, and it feels great. Again, this understanding of flow is something that is part of our nature. It's part of our biology, our chemistry, our physiology, our very makeup. The very makeup of us and the world around us is based on this understanding of flow. And so grounding is life. And again, earthing is a grounding practice. It's wonderful. I love to go climb into the mud whenever I can. I'm an earthy being. That's a beautiful grounding practice. Anyways, maybe share the ways in which you find ways to ground, in which if you notice some stagnation, journaling is a wonderful grounding practice, because you know what happens? A lot of excessive energy here, and as I start writing, well, that excessive energy here flows out that pen and onto that paper. That's a grounding practice. So what are the ways in which you ground? Stay grounded, my friends.